Hello everyone watching at home, this is Sarvan McClinton from Adelaide Eternal bringing you another 7-minute 7-point series deck tech. This time I'm bringing you Infect. So I've made this Infect deck to not be a budget deck because it is 3 colours. However, just as a quick aside in terms of budget, those of you who are on a budget, you can drop Mox Emerald and Underground Sea and Bayou. So you actually drop the third colour, which is only for 3 black cards and a couple of black cards in the sideboard, and play an alternate build where you use Dig Through Time and Green Sun Zenith for a little bit more consistency because you have fewer Infect creatures. So that aside, let's talk about the non-budget version, which is my version at the moment. I really love jamming this particular version on Xmage because I don't have to play control, and I hate playing control when I'm online because the amount of clicks is just ridiculous. So instead, play a creature, attack with it, pump it, and kill your opponent with 10 poison counters. Simple strategy, right? So how do you make that work in Highlander? That's the tricky part because as you've seen in Modern and in Legacy, there's a variety of very useful, powerful cards that allow you to ensure that you deal all the damage to your opponent in poison counters. However, when it comes to Highlander, we have to be a little bit more creative. First of all, let's have a look at our creature suite. So in terms of creatures, we have 11 Infect creatures or things that can find Infect creatures. So Inkmoth Nexus, Crop Rotation and Sylvan Scrying for Inkmoth Nexus essentially counts as 3 different creatures because most of the time your game is not going to go long enough for this to be relevant. However, Crop Rotation and Sylvan Scrying will also find you useful lands, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, the other creatures, it's kind of descending order of awesomeness. So we start with Glistener Elf and Inkmoth Nexus. Inkmoth Nexus doesn't get Abrupt Decay, which is really important, and Blighted Agent. Then we have Plague Stinger, which has flying, and the important part is that they have some kind of evasion or are very cheap. So that's these creatures here. Then we have the not quite as good creatures, but entirely playable. This one is really good against other opposing creature decks because when it gets blocked, it gets really big, kills their creature, so they basically can't block, but they're forced to block because otherwise they're going to die. It's also really good when you give it trample and it gets blocked to get free pumps. This creature has Regenerate. This creature occasionally allows you to use mana, but really at the end of the day, these 2 here are the critical mass of 2 drops for 1/1 Infectors. Now, we have Turbo Mana here as well in Emerald and Chrome Mox to ensure that we come out of the gates really fast. And we have a free point in the deck, which gives us Wasteland. And Wasteland is often very, very useful against decks that involve things like Maze of Ith and those types of decks that are really going to annoy us. And then we can move on to the pumping, because essentially what is an Infect creature as a 1/1? Well, it needs to be bigger. So first of all, let's look at the cards that simply increase its power or toughness. So we have the mainstays of Modern and the other mainstays as well in terms of efficiency. 1 mana +4/+4, +4/+4, and 0 mana +2/+2, and then obviously 1 mana +6/+6. They are the powerful ones, and 0 mana +4/+4 is insane. So those are your best suite of sheer volume of counters, poison counters. Then we have the Noble Hierarch, which is a consistent form of +1/+1, as well as Cathedral of War. This card is amazing. It's like having a second Noble Hierarch in your deck, and it's really underplayed because really the only place that you'd play it is Infect. Pendelhaven as well, another source of this bonus. But then we have Centaur Garden, which is yet another pump in the form of a land. So as you can see, our land slots, it brings us up to 21 mana producing sources, but in reality they're very, very versatile. And as I said before, Sylvan Scrying and Crop Rotation, out of nowhere when your opponent thinks they're not going to die, your last card Crop Rotation, you rotate for Centaur Garden, you use it to +3/+3 your creature and kill them. Now then we have the other pump or kind of pump that gives us evasion. Now evasion is very, very important. We have 3 forms of evasion in Rancor, Berserk and Larger Than Life that give us trample. Now Larger Than Life is not particularly efficient efficient because it's 2 mana, but the reason we play it is because of the trample. Very, very important to get your poison counters past blockers. Then we have another way to get past blockers, Distortion Strike and Slip Through Space, which again are very, very useful at getting those poison counters to essentially resolve, and also fill your graveyard for a delve over here. Now, we have also our suite here, which is protecting our essentially combo, an Infect creature plus pump. And we have the free counter spells, Misdirection, Forceful, but Misdirection can also essentially counter Abrupt Decay, which is very useful, and Misstep and Daze. Then we have Apostle's Blessing, which essentially gives your creature unblockability as well as protects it from a removal spell. We have Vines of Vastwood, a mainstay, as well as Blossoming Defense, Flusterstorm and Spell Pierce in the main deck, and they're almost always protecting our creature rather than, say, countering a Jace the Mind Sculptor or something. If the game's gone that long, it's probably an issue for you. Then we have this useful card here called Simic Charm, which really, this is the ideal deck for Simic Charm. All 3 modes are always relevant every single game you play, which is why you can justify its inefficiency of cost. As you can see in terms of cost, nothing in the deck is more than 2 mana except for Wild Defiance, because Wild Defiance is amazing. Once you play with it, you'll realise why. But everything else is 2 mana or less, and Simic Charm right there at the top allows you to either pump or protect your creature or remove a blocker and allow you to swing for lethal. Very, very important. We only have 1 true removal spell because of its flexibility in the deck, and then we have Umazal's Jitte, which serves as both pump and removal as well. We have ways to find the cards that we need and to fill up our graveyard, and Jace Vryn's Prodigy is almost always playing and then the next turn flipping and flashing back one of these pump spells for lethal. So let's have a quick look at the sideboard. So in the sideboard we have our anti-control package. So Sylvan Library is great to play the long game, and then the Hand Disruption as well to ensure that we have a way that is clear. Between Gitaxian Probe and these 2 Hand Disruption spells, you'll be able to see when you can go off. Seed Time is really, really cool in this deck because obviously it responds to their end of turn, Brainstorm or some other thing they're going to do, or a counter spell. You Seed Time, you untap, and then you go for lethal. Spellskite as well, really good against all the bolts and against Kespile. And then we have the anti-creature package. Send to Sleep, really, really good at essentially making your Infectors unblockable for 2 turns. Dark Blast, really good as well for recursive removal against elf decks, because elf decks are annoying because they just simply throw them in front of your creatures and go for the long game. 2 free removal spells and Hydroblast against burn. And then this is your anti-combo package. So a whole bunch of anti-graveyard hate, as well as very, very cheap interaction for the workshop decks. So if you like the look of this deck, sleeve it up. It's a whole lot of fun. And if you've played Infect in other formats, you'll be very familiar with it. And in Highlander, it's extremely, extremely fun. So have a go and tell me what you think.